Killdozer. Killdozer.
Hello there. So, I'm going to share with you today something that stayed with me for a long time since I first started reading about this. I think I maybe read about this in the mid 2000s, and it's just, I think I'm drawn to kind of stuff where some of it plays out on television and like where the thing that you're used to being quite safe and normal um, is, you know, shocking or surprising. And this is definitely falls in that category. It's, I guess these days it would come under the heading true crime. I'm kind of interested in how this person came to do the things he did. I'm also conscious of that there's real lives lost in this. Some of the footage that I'm going to show into this, once I've discussed it with you, I've got the actual footage of what happened and some pictures from before and after and during this story. And I'm just really kind of, I guess the word is, um, it's easy to say things are shocking. Everything's shocking, isn't it? But it is shocking because I think everyone approaches this in a very relaxed, sort of unassuming way, and doesn't take this gentleman particularly seriously until they do, until they have no choice but to take it seriously. So I'm going to take you through the timeline of events in a certain amount of detail, and then what I'm going to do is sort of show you what happened, because I've made like a short video, 5-6 minutes of pictures and information and the actual local television that was broadcast. So who am I talking about today? Without rambling on too much, who am I talking about? Albert Dryden. So Albert Dryden was born in 1940. So in a place called Consett in the UK. He was one of 8 children, and he was the 5th eldest of 4 boys and 4 girls. 1952, there's a pivotal moment in his life. He's 17, he gets a firearms certificate, and he buys a 22 rifle. In 1960, his house is raided by police. He's charged with having illegal possession of firearms and placed on probation for 12 months. So this is 1960, already some disturbing signs, disturbing things that you may notice. Detective Constable who arrested him at the time said he has a mania for firearms and has shown a genius for them, which I find quite an interesting statement. So in 1961, he was in court for firing rockets on Concert Moor and mortars as well. Unbelievable. And he tells the Northern Echo at the time that he's going to emigrate to Argentina, where he can fire guns and rockets into the air without disturbing anyone. By 1963, that did not happen. He was terrorizing local farmers and back in court. He said to one of them, "If you interfere with me, I'll fill you full of bullets." Okay, so this is somebody who, this is before the things that so-called people supported, and, you know, he has his supporters, like a lot of people, if you watch my Realm Moat video. You know, this behavior is sort of predated by the things that people kind of identify and feel sorry for him for, or whatever it is that they kind of get on board with. This behavior is already ingrained in him well before that, 20, 30 years earlier. So by 1981, he's made redundant from his job at Steelworks. And in 1982, he buys some land. No, sorry, that's not true. He rents some land. This is quite key, actually, in Eliza Lane, Buttsfield, which I'm not aware of that, but I think it's near Concert, and buys it in 1984. So he does own this land. Now, in 1988 is a really important moment in his life. He buys and starts to build. Sorry, he's already bought, but he starts to build this bungalow. This bungalow that is pivotal to our story. Now, the council receives its first complaints 1 year later about the bungalow. He says to the council, this is a summer house for his mother. Then he says it's a nuclear shelter. Then he says it's a store. Then he says it's a cattle shed. They issue an enforcement notice to demolish the bungalow in 1989. Okay, by 1990, in January, a lot happens in 1990. A public inquiry is held into the planning issues. In March, he loses his appeal. In April, his mother passes away, age 82. She dies. He says the planning wrangle has killed her, so he's got a grudge. He's angry. Now, November. Excuse me. November, Dryden has not complied with any enforcement notice. The planning officer, Harry Collinson, who we'll meet later on, says that Dryden has made a series of extravagant threats against anyone who tries to knock down the bungalow. These include threatening to blow up the council chamber and threatening to shoot people. One of Dryden's friends, he does have a lot of supporters, actually throws a live cockerel into the planning department offices at Mr. Collinson. So Collinson is kind of the focus of this anger at this point. Now, let's move to June 20th, 1991. This is the day the bungalow was due to be demolished. So at this moment, you know, there are lots of things in, you know, you'll see people who are, you know, in disputes about land, whether it's with neighbors or the council, or building something they shouldn't build, or having to take it down. These things do happen quite a lot. But 9 a.m. on June 20th, 1991, that's when things started being a little bit different than your usual squabbles over land and things. So Sergeant Colin Campbell, PC Stephen Campbell, and PC Ian Kirkup arrive at the bungalow. A police armed response vehicle and an ambulance are on standby at the police station. So this is interesting. I'm not quite sure about how this works, how these people are going to this place knowing that there's a history of violent threats and use of firearms, yet the armed response vehicle and the ambulance are on standby. Okay, but we're still letting a lot of these people go into the situation. I'm not quite sure. It's not for me. I'm sure there's been inquiries and things like that. We'll talk a bit more about that later. But Derwentshire council officials, led by Harry Collinson, and contractors also arrive. Dryden promises Sergeant Campbell there'll be no trouble. These prove the opposite of prophetic words. Dryden asked council solicitor Mike Dunstan and Harry Collison to look at a letter from the Department of the DOE, pinned on the gate. Dryden claims that an inspector will visit the bungalow in 5 weeks before making a decision. So you can't take this down, knock this down, because in 5 weeks there's going to be a decision made. Mr. Collison said the letter does not challenge the demolition order. Dryden says if they come through the gates, they'll be charged with criminal damage. He says he has goats and hens in the bungalow and claims the RSPCA are on their way to attend. So the RSPCA, the Royal Society for Protection of Animals, he's saying that they're on their way. Now, Mr. Collinson says the demolition teams will take the livestock out of the building. He warns Dryden not to obstruct the demolition team. And at this point, everything's quite cordial. There's no shouting or screaming. In fact, there isn't really any shouting or screaming in this run up to this point, which is quite strange. Now, Dryden warns him, you might not be around to see the outcome of this disaster. You have been warned. Again, all very calmly stated. You hear some of this on the video that I'll show later. If you had any sense, you would go away and wait 5 weeks. You are making a sad decision. Observers, police, reporters and cameramen move around the perimeter fences. Mr. Collinson and Mr. Graham, John Graham, a friend of Dryden, it's amazing how many supporters he has, argue. Mr. Collinson orders a bulldozer to be driven off the low loader and move towards the fence. Dryden draws his gun and he just waves it around at this point, aimlessly at council officials and journalists on the other side of the fence. Mr. Collinson says to the cameraman, "Can we get a shot of this gun?" Now this proves to be, and this is again, that bit is in the video, as he's asking to have it filmed and pictures taken of it, Dryden levels the gun at Mr. Collinson very calmly and shoots him once in the chest at close range. So bearing in mind, they're just opposite each other in like a fence, just over a boundary fence. Dryden pushes his hand through the fence and fires off 3 or 4 more shots, hitting a BBC reporter, Tony Belmont, who you'll hear in the video, who carries on reporting, actually, in the arm. He shoots PC Stephen Campbell. He gets shot close to his spine. The reporter says like he gets shot in his leg or his buttocks or something, but it's actually his spine. Observers, journalists, and officials, they run. They all just start to run. Again, it's not like screaming and panic. It's just like running away. They run towards the A68 road. Dryden climbs over a fence and goes to Collison's body. It's now laying in a ditch, and he shoots him again. Superintendent Stan Hegarty and Inspector Jeff Young arrive in a police car from the opposite end of Eliza Lane. He reloads and fires at the car, and it reverses away at speed. He then fires shots at the bulldozer, the low loader, and parked cars, shooting Miss Collison again, once in the chest. Dryden walks back to the caravan where he takes refuge. Now, 12 minutes after the shooting, police armed response unit vehicle carrying PCs Andy Ray and Philip Brown, you'll see pictures of those in the video, they take up position 25 feet from the caravan and they begin talking to Dryden. Tactical arms team, including Sergeant John Taylor, arrived from police headquarters in Durham. Now, this is 11:20, so we're a couple of hours into this whole situation now. Sergeant Taylor approaches the caravan. He carries a field telephone. So, they often try and build up a rapport, give them this telephone and talk to them. He agrees to use it and to maintain contact with the police. Dryden walks to his perimeter fence to watch the sergeant connect the telephone. It's brave doing that. At this point, he's already, shot at people. Seeing Dryden's holster empty, Sergeant Taylor tackles him. PCs Ray and Brown climb the fence and secure his arrest. So they jump him essentially when they realize he's out of ammo. Now Dryden claims the land is mined like landmines, and the bungalow is booby trapped. A bomb disposal squad are called from Catterick, so that's the army camp. But on arrival, decide to call in 521 Company, 11th Ordnance Battalion from the south. So they must have thought this is beyond their capabilities and from the army. Let's get bomb disposal in from the police. So they believed him, and he's got a history. It was interesting that they believed that, but obviously earlier on, everyone was kind of almost just, from the impression I get from the video, is people are kind of just watching him a bit like a local crackpot, but they don't think he's going to do anything. So the aftermath, so we're June 22 and June 22nd now. After a 2-day electronic and manual sweep of the land, no explosives are found. Officers found 9 guns, including the murder weapon, in the bungalow. A further 33 weapons are found at Priestman Avenue in Concert. So it's his actual house. Found another 33 weapons. So we're talking well over 40 weapons here. On July the 1st, he makes his second appearance at Concert Magistrates, charged with murder and attempted murder. 100 people turn out to support him with shouts of "Good luck, Albie." more than 3,000 people signed a petition calling for an inquiry. It's insane, isn't it? And like how people become like folk heroes for doing these things when, it's took someone's life essentially for doing their job. He is sentenced to life in prison for murder, 2 counts of attempted murder. And I've put this just as a kind of little, important picture. There's a picture in my video of a nature reserve that has been opened in memory of Mr. Collison by the Derwentside District Council for his, it's really nice actually. It says a tragic price to pay for doing a job which we as members of the community required him to carry out. This is quite like a cold thing to say. It doesn't say what he's like as a person, but I guess it's kind of saying that, as a public servant, he was serving the public, and that was, like a horrendous thing to happen. So that's the timeline of the day. I want to take you through a little bit more detail of the whole thing, of the whole situation. So this is a little bit more color to what I've just told you. So that's the timeline. We'll show you a video shortly about what happened, and you can see for yourself. Now, this standoff, essentially what it became, I'm not going to talk too much more about that. I'm going to give you a little bit more background before, after as well. So he was sentenced to 2 terms for life imprisonment to run concurrently. His appeal was dismissed. His applications for parole were refused, and he showed no remorse. So that's why the parole wasn't even an option. He had a stroke in 2017 and stayed in a nursing home on compassionate grounds. And he died in 2018, age 78, in a care home following his prison release. So to give you a little bit of background about him, he worked for the iron company, as did his dad. His mum and dad were members of the Salvation Army and liked and respected in the community. His big family, as I said, but was a very solitary child for a big family. Very active imagination, flights of fantasy, not particularly academic, well below average intelligence when tested. The first gun that he first purchased was a World War One unlicensed gun. And actually, he had that at age 11. That's the one he used to kill Collinson. It's just like he's I don't know, he hasn't changed much since the age of 11 onwards. It was hard to find the correct cartridges for those. So he actually made and manufactured his own ammunition, which kind of goes along with what that policeman was saying earlier on at the beginning about him being a genius with weaponry, which is really, really interesting, like really strange. He converted shotgun shells for it. Now, the area was called Buttsfield, which is like a rural area. And the incident was captured on camera and transmitted on the BBC's regional news programme Look North. So Look North is kind of shown after the main news. It goes off to different local news. And where I lived, it was like Granada Tonight or Northwest Tonight on the BBC. It's the BBC's Look North would be for sort of the north parts of the UK. A fuller version of the footage, including the prior visit, now forms part of the BBC's internal training course on filming safety. So they try to learn from this as well. It shows, the camera panning to Dryden, and then it shows him shooting. You'll see this later on, but it is used as part of a training video now to kind of remind people of their safeguarding and safety of each other, and when you're going into different filming places. Search the property found 10 handguns, 15 rifles, 3 shotguns, 2 homemade mortars, 8 projectiles, an improvised propane bomb, and a 20mm cannon modified to be attached to one of his vehicles. He had no firearm license, and all of the weapons were illegally held. Apparently, before the murder, Collinson and Dryden had a friendly relationship, regularly visiting him to advise Dryden on planting trees for screening and what type of building work was permitted. However, his bizarre behaviour, decision to build a deep trench in which to build the bungalow, with just the roof showing, and his threats towards the staff revealed the council had wanted to visit the site under cover of darkness to carry out the demolition when Dryden would have been asleep at his home several miles away. Collinson disagreed with this. He thought it would be underhand after their relationship they had together and like in terms of how they got along, and insisted that their action should take place during the day. He also did not expect Dryden to back down and arrange for camera crew to record it, allow the council to retreat without demolition, which would have allowed the council to retreat without demolishing the building and passing that footage to the High Court. So he wasn't like going in with the intention of just, you know, running roughshod over Dryden's property. What he wanted to do was kind of be filmed that he couldn't do these things, but that didn't happen. He wanted to pass this to the High Court and then just be like, you guys deal with it. But he didn't get to do that, sadly. So Dryden was charged at the Newcastle Crown Court in 1992, charged with murder, attempted murder, and wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm as well. 13 days of evidence. They took 2 hours to decide. Guilty of murder, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of wounding, and sentenced to life. Life for the attempted murder, 2 lots of 7 years for the woundings, all to be served concurrently. The Justice Ebsworth, the judge, Mrs. Justice Ebsworth, she said, "The state of your mind on June 20th was abnormal, but not abnormal to the extent of diminishing your responsibility for what you did. You are a dangerous man." He appealed in 94. He also made 4 applications for parole, did not happen. So let's go to the release. He had a stroke in 2017, was released on compassionate grounds to a residential care home. Collinson's brother said, "Personally, I couldn't bloody care less for what happens to Albert Dryden. If he dies slowly, that's good. I'll be happy about that. He never showed one bit of remorse in all the 26 years he's been in prison. He still tried to justify his actions. If the police had done their job properly, my brother wouldn't have been killed, and Albert Dryden wouldn't have spent all of this time in prison." Dryden died in 2018 in a care home following his prison release. Now, weird aside, extra bit, there was a punk band called the Angelic Upstarts, and they did a song called Albert's Got a Gun. Death on a Summer's Day by police officer David Blackie recalls the incident as witnessed by him on the day, so he was actually there as a witness. So just to give you a bit of citation of where I got a lot of the information from, the Northern News and Echo was where I got most of my information from. I'd saved this for a long while because they did like a photo story, and I was just fascinated by it. I just thought, like, this is like almost like something out of the Wild West, but like in rural Britain. I also looked at the Newcastle and Time Journal. I also used The Guardian. Death on a Summer's Day, I had a little look on that. I didn't buy it. I listened to Bombed Out, the song, just wasn't particularly good, but fair enough, they made a song about it. The Northern Echo a lot, the Times from 1991. What else did I use? The Evening Chronicle, Newcastle upon Tyne Evening Chronicle, I read quite a bit from there. So there's lots to find out and lots of information. Even the Wikipedia article is quite detailed about it because it's just so unusual, So I'm going to share now with you the video. The pictures go up to a point, and then there's a pause, and then the actual thing. So if it is likely to upset you or shake you or you not like it, please don't watch that bit. Just, you know, sometimes I'm not sure how I feel about true crime, particularly like joking about it or kind of making it into, you know, these are human beings that made choices based on the things that were going on in their lives and in their heads. And I guess sometimes it like I've said in other videos, it makes things easier to make somebody into a monster. But also, I think, you know, it's even scarier when you realize that, you know, there's kind of unmet mental health needs or things that have happened to them that have made them the way they are, or things that are just an inclination to doing something that is hard to explain or impossible to explain. So it's really sad for the family of Mr. Collinson and the other people who were injured on that day. But I find it quite, I guess, is it morbidly fascinating to kind of look into these things. I've done it a few times now on a few videos, just try and get inside the heads of these people. And also when things happen live or recorded for TV and they go awry, it's something that makes my kind of eyes just sort of freeze and watch these things in like awe. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why that is. I think even like when I was a kid, if there was things on TV and say the TV channel broke down and it just went to the little, we'll be right back kind of thing, it always kind of scared me a little bit. Just that I guess I was brought up by TV in a lot of ways, and when TV didn't do the things I was used to it doing, that really worried me. So when I saw that this was like a kind of local news show, and then it kind of went completely off, off center, and went into a very strange situation. It caught my attention, and yeah, I mean, at least the BBC used it in a way of helping safeguarding. I wonder if the police have ever studied this or looked into how they dealt with it. Maybe how councils deal with land disputes. People who have grabbed hold of this, I bet they're the kind of Englishman's Home Mrs. Castle crew. Yeah, I totally agree with that to a certain degree. However, like this isn't, something where somebody should have lost their life. Let's be completely honest about that and open about that. So I hope you've found this interesting. If you're interested in this kind of video that I've done a few about real people like Raoul Moe, and I've done one about obviously this one. I've talked about things that child's play. I've talked about and I'm about to do a video on some people from war history as well. So if there's anybody that you think you'd like me to chat about or talk about, or anything you've got to say about this video, please let me know. How do you feel about true crime? Did you get into true crime when the podcast saw kicked in with like Serial and things like that, the Adnan Syed and all that kind of stuff? Or have you always been a kind of unsolved mysteries, or what kind of things do you like watching that are kind of a little bit fact, a little bit fiction? Obviously, this is completely fact. These things really did happen. But what sort of things do you prefer? Like, there's the In Cold Blood film, which there's Rillington Place, all based on real things. Obviously, Zodiac stuff. And then you've got them, I think, a little bit more sensationalized ones, the Ryan Murphy stuff, the Dharma, and all that kind of things. Where I kind of, that's maybe where I bow out a little bit. But where's your line? What sort of interest have you got in this? In this area? So yeah, time now to take me off the screen for a moment and put the video on, and I'll see you in the next video. So thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
It should have been a routine end to a 3-year planning row, but when officials from Derwentside Council arrived with bulldozers to demolish Albert Dryden's bungalow, built without planning permission, they were refused access. While BBC cameraman Phil Dobson and soundman Simon Forrester recorded the scene, Mr. Dryden and planning officers confronted each other.
Can you get a shot of this gun?
As more shots were fired from a pistol, the camera crew and Look North reporter Tony Belmont ran for cover.
We were standing watching what was going on. The chief planner was trying to persuade the chap to move out the way and let the digger go in. And then a shot rang out, the chief planner fell to the ground, and I felt a shot in the arm, and I've clearly been shot here in the arm. I'm now hopefully going to get some medical treatment. A policeman was also shot in the buttock here, and the councillor was shot in the chest.
Hi, I'm Mark Speight.
How do you stop a chalk drawing from smudging?
And I'm going to prove to you that anybody can draw.
You could soon be a top tuner.
Hello, hi. I wanted to do this video, like a little tribute discussion about Mark Speight. So I'm going to give you a little overview who he is. Mark Speight passed away in 2008, which is quite shocking because it feels quite recent. I think things that you see on children's TV sometimes hit you harder because when fun things or things that you watch for like as a kid that you enjoy, they take on like a serious tone, it can really kind of feel very jarring and a bit scary. And I think sometimes these things happen. And obviously, I don't think I was I want to have been a young kid. I'd maybe even been a young adult when Mark Speight passed away. But I was aware of him because he'd been on our screens for a long time. And I always found him a really entertaining person. I think we're as kids, we're always kind of drawn to those larger than life personalities that are like from people in the 80s, like Timmy Mallet and stuff like that. It might kind of see it as an adult. It's easy to kind of look back and kind of sneer and go, oh, these people. But actually, those ones who had lots of energy and big and bright, it's I guess we can see it as kind of an American aesthetic, but actually, like that's what you want when you're a kid. You want things to be fun and funny. Like you want, things flying around. You want like kind of high energy and interest of stuff. You don't want a kind of watch with mother, po-faced kind of approach to stuff. And I think that you sometimes got like a carbon copy presenters, and Mark Speight definitely wasn't that. I always liked him. I'm going to talk a little bit through his career and other things as well. There is a few things I'm going to be discussing that are really sad, and I think that if there is anyone who kind of watches this and feels like that they're in a similar spot in life where he was at this point, and we're all very lucky if you go through your life without something terrible happening or something very upsetting happening that really hits you hard. And if that is the case, there's so many people who love and care about you, even if you try and convince yourself otherwise. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Like, to kind of keep that in mind. But I wanted to talk about this because I was interested in art as a kid. Again, it's hard to talk about anything from 80s British TV without somebody being an absolute reprobate. But I was like a massive fan of watching like Rolf's Cartoon Club and Rolf Harris and stuff like that. Obviously, scumbag, dead scumbag as well. But that I was terrible at art and terrible at drawing, awful. But I used to love like drawing pictures of my dog and sketching and just doing it for fun. I thought I was good. I wanted to do like be a cartoonist. I love cartoons and I love Tex Avery and all that kind of stuff. Just didn't have the talent, couldn't pick it up. But I love Tintin, Hergé's style. I love Asterix, Goscinny, and others. Though I loved buying comics, which were really hard to get hold of in the UK. Any DC and Marvel were really hard to get hold of in like around 83, 84. I used to get them from one particular newsagent. But like art always interests me. I like watching art programs. Sometimes they're a bit on the boring side, but I like ones where they maybe combined it with cartoons, so like Rolf's Cartoon Club, but also like I never really got into CITV that much, so I know that some people love Art Attack with Neil Buchanan. Smart, it was okay. It was a bit BBC, like BBC ones with actual presenters in it sometimes felt a bit like you were learning something, and like when you're watching TV after school you don't want to be learning anything. But what stood out for me was I watched Smart because I found Mark Speight really interesting, quite funny. Like when you're a kid you like people who are funny. So he worked on Smart, the TV show, for 14 years. I didn't even realize. So I guess that would make sense why I remember it, because he went through the different iterations of it. So obviously when he passed away, I probably wasn't watching it, but I remember seeing clips and things like that. It's a bit like if something bad happens on Blue Peter, or somebody does drugs, or if you've ever seen the amazing Armstrong and Miller sketches about the apologies, children's TV presenter apologies, and it's like, and that's when I accidentally helped her accidentally drank an adult beverage or something like that. All that, they're hilarious, they're so good. I really didn't sell that very well. But Mark Speight was on something called See It, Saw It, which was after my time as a kid, but I looked into this because of doing this video, and I remembered, obviously I must have skipped past it, whether it was kind of like a king, and the girl who was his jester on it would become his fiance, and her name was Natasha Collins. So they're Mark Speight and Natasha Collins like linked together forever, she passed away in 2000. So I'm going to kind of... Did she pass away in 2000? That feels like a... No, she passed away. Of course, she passed away in 2008. I've made a mistake with that straight away. I think she was in that program in 2000. So he left school at 16 to become a cartoonist, which I think is awesome. But he did do a degree in commercial and graphic art while working on television set construction. So I imagine it's a bit like, I know people who like maybe gone into the world of work and then through that kind of vocational way of getting a qualification in some sort of way. He just went along to an audition, was successful in his audition to become one of the first presenters of Smart. And he actually, I didn't realize this, but had a lot of, because there is a charity in his name now, but there was actually a name, a lot of work that he did in charity while he was still alive, childline muscular dystrophy. So I believe he's from like the Midlands, like Staffordshire Midlands way. I might offend people from Staffordshire if I say it's the Midlands, but in my head, it's kind of, you know, a similar sort of area. Apparently, he was like the class joker at school. That makes sense, but also had quite a lot of like issues with people bullying him because he was kind of a bit of like a short attention span and a little bit of an easy target. You know, and that's maybe something that a lot of these like people that are bigger, larger than life energy, it's almost like their candle is burning faster than everyone else's, like the Robin Williams, you know. And I always feel like, you know, that there's a kind of something that I really do identify with that. I think like I'm like that, honestly. My brain is always going, I'm always tired because of what's going on in my brain. And things feel really important and urgent, and like emotions are more, and like little things feel really big, and you have to it's really hard to try and manage that. And even in my 40s, I'm still trying to get used to it. But I kind of feel like this in myself, and I see it in people who I think I'm a creative person, but I'm not successful. It depends what successful is, but creative person in like a mainstream sort of way. Like I love to write, and I've always thinking of things, ideas, and writing notes, and always doing stuff. Always have done. But the people who do that on a greater scale, they're still dealing with those same things. So like I kind of see like Mark Speight and Robin Williams, and like just sort of people who you can kind of see people go, they're always on the go, always on the go. Well, there is a period of time where even if they're sat, like if I can, I'd imagine, project on myself onto these, like sometimes like you're sat and you're doing nothing, you're actually still doing a lot. Like it's very, very hard to stop. So he would bounce ideas and jokes off castmates and Smart. Originally it started as Zoe Ball was the presenter with him, and a guy called Jay Burridge, and then Josie Darby was on there, and then Kirsten O'Brien, and then Lizzie Botham. I don't know Lizzie Botham. I must have been not watching kids TV at that point. But there was Smart on the Road, Smart Teenies. I don't know what Smart Teenies was. I was looking at that before. I was trying to work out. I think it's like a spin-off, I think, where they would like, I guess it was for younger children, like younger artwork. Because it's like teaching them about shapes and patterns and things like that. So that's pretty cool. I like that. That's a nice idea. There's been some great stuff. Like CBBC was a great, CBeebies was a great channel, like for free to not free to, but like free view for people. And I think like I always think about that, like that's a really, like what you sit your kids in front of is completely up to you. In the same way as what you eat, what you give them to eat or whatever. But like sometimes by complete accident, you're exposed to something that's really cool and helps you develop as a human. So like as a kid, like I guess I just was like TV was my babysitter, and I just kind of filtered out different things. But I remember just watching so many different people that kind of even now thinking back, I'm like, oh, that's really inspiring, or kind of obviously things are formed in your brain when you're young. So and television is a big part of that, but not necessarily in a negative way, like people like to sometimes frame it. He was on a TV show, which I didn't watch Saturday morning ITV for some reason. I was a Saturday morning BBC person. It's called Scratchy and Co. And I look back, he plays this character. He is Scratchy. You've got Ronnie Ancona, the impressionist, on there, sort of rubber, almost like Lazy Town kind of look. I think he was going for, from clips I've seen, things like, I think he's going for like a Max Headroom style, and I loved Max Headroom. I don't know about you guys. I love Max Headroom, and also I'm obsessed with that guy who hacked into the TV, public access TV in America, and pretending to be Max Headroom. I'm obsessed with that. I just find it really weird. So I think it was nominated for a BAFTA, and it then later on that the SMTV took over with Anton Deck. So Scratchy and Co was another one, and he actually was in Timmy Towers, the Timmy Mallet TV show. I find Timmy Mallet really interesting as well. He's literally been cycling around the country, but he's a really good artist too. He did TV shows about Name That Tune, about cartoons, and also worked on religious show, Heaven and Earth show. I'm not sure about that. What his denomination is. This Morning, and he was on the Celebrity Wrestling. Now I remember watching it because as you know, I'm a wrestling fan. I remember him being on Celebrity Wrestling, and and See It, Saw It was where he met his partner, Natasha Collins. We'll talk a bit about that later. So he did have a lot of projects on the go at all time. He did this thing called Speight of the Art, which was like an art workshop that he ran for kids. And the stories that kids have come out with if you go on X and you type in Mark Speight, you go on Twitter, Mark, oh, my dog's barking, and you look at like Mark Speight's name, you'll find lots of people who go, oh, this guy got me into art. Like, this guy was patient with me and showed me how to do this thing on it's all positive stuff. It's so lovely. It really is nice. These workshops, a lot of things with muscular dystrophy, Childline, and he did a big art project for Comic Relief. But I'm going to kind of talk now about something that's like a bit harder to talk about. So obviously, there's a tragedy related to Mark Speight. So it kind of started, and I don't want it to be the focus of this, but I do also want it to kind of, highlight the, creative, fun people. They have a lot. It doesn't mean that person is happy with how they present themselves, and that goes for everyone, I guess. I mean, I just like let your friends know that you love them, and let your family know that you love them. And I know that's like so twee and so cliched, but it really does matter. Like, you might not know the right thing to do. We had some bad stuff happen in our family, and a lot of bad stuff. And I definitely, over the last couple of years, I've changed certainly how I am with friends. Like, I'll tell my friends I love them, and I don't know if that's because I've known them longer and I'm more comfortable. Like, I don't know what it is, but I'm quite happy to tell people that I love them, and I don't need them to say it back. It's like, I want them to know. So in this situation, I don't know if he felt able to reach out, but it obviously was it felt like the end of his world. What happened? So in 2008, his I guess if we go back a little bit, that might make it a little bit more easier to explain. So so Natasha Collins was had like an accident, and because of this accident, she was in a car crash. There was the accident, and it stopped her career. Now, this is all like reported fact from like police reports and stuff. So I'm not kind of gossiping or saying anything. But basically, she, due to various different things in her system, she drowned in the bath. Now, at the time, due to what was in her system and things like that, Mark Speight was arrested and on suspicion of this. Obviously, the inquest determined that he had no responsibility for this. It was the burns and death by misadventure. Let's put it that way. That's what it was seen. But later that year, obviously, Mark Speight, devastated, was found. He took his own life. Let's put it that way. He took his own life, and he just basically he left notes saying that he couldn't live without Natasha Collins. It was very, very sad, and I think people were really shocked. And I think what stood out for me a bit, like I said before, is when you see these things on TV, like the producer or one of the cast of a TV show that are kind of there, and it's quite somber, and they are trying to break to a young audience that something real and serious has happened. It's a bit like when something happens in professional wrestling, and say somebody's had an accident or someone's died or passed away, but the storylines are kind of having people die and bad things happen all the time, and they're trying to say, well, no, this is serious, this is a serious tone, this is thing, and people are going, is this serious? Because you do this kind of thing a lot to kind of get a point across in a storyline. So it's like you're not sure how to take it, certainly as a kid. I remember seeing these things, and it's strange. You kind of remember them, even if you didn't see them exactly at the time. You remember seeing them because it was like a shock, I guess. It's just a shock to see, and you notice these things. Smart was still running when he disappeared, and the BBC stopped the repeat edition of that. At the inquest, it had happened, and he'd kind of the cancelled repeats of things, but by February of that year, so this was like January when Natasha Collins passed away, he stepped away from the show. He just said he couldn't continue. Let's have a look. And I'm trying to kind of do this without going like being too salacious, because I don't want that to be the focus of the video. I just think it's like really cool if you check out some of his stuff. But also, his legacy. So I'm going to have a little talk about that. So obviously, later on around April, April, and was when Mark Speight passed away, and I want to kind of now focus a little bit on the aftermath of that. When it was reported on Newsround, there was complaints that it upset young viewers. They hadn't used certain words, but they said like police don't think he was killed by anyone else. At the funeral, his dad, so obviously his dad was like pretty amazing. His dad sounds like a really amazing guy, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. So his dad's got the Speight of the Art Foundation now that's still going now, and he is a force pushing that forward, providing art for lots of people who maybe wouldn't have art and access to art, which is pretty amazing. So check out Speight of the Art, or SP8 of the Art. You can still find that. There's a memorial service that was that was done, and at that I've got some sort of quotes from Dad about that, and I'll just talk to you a little bit about that. So there's a tribute this year before I go into, because I want to kind of leave it with the dad part. So 16th anniversary was in April 2024. Kirsten O'Brien, who seemingly had a really nice relationship, friend relationship with him, like an actual off-screen friendship, and I'm sure many people did. And she just said what a gloriously funny man he was, and so loved. And people are saying things like, can't believe it's been 16 years, part of my childhood. Matt was a character loved by kids and grew up watching. One said, they said, don't meet your heroes, but I went to an event 20 years ago as a child, and he was running an art workshop and teaching us how to use perspective. I met him at the end, and he was so kind and excited to see my drawing and signed it for me. So that's really nice. It says, you two in my childhood. I remember meeting Mark at Butlins. I was starstruck. You fed my creative side. I am forever grateful. And there is a link there to Samaritans. If you just in the UK, Samaritans, but there are so many different people to reach out to, whatever it is that's specifically concerning you. And I think that anyone who has lost someone in situations like that, and I have, I kind of there's a certain period where they are so in their own heads. There you feel like there's nothing you could say, but in terms of being that person, I think sometimes just having one person to talk to openly and get it all out might be really hard for them, but really important. So if that's one thing that comes out of this video, is if you're kind of feeling like that, you know, your loss will be felt just, you know, a millionfold more than you think. There is always someone who loves and cares about you. You might not think so, but there is. And sometimes you can convince yourself 100% that there isn't. And so I'm just going to talk about Mark Speight's dad. So he says his son will be with him forever. I was reading this really nice article from 2015, and his dad, Oliver Speight, was talking about him, and he was saying, like, when the policeman broke the news to him, like, he hugged the policeman and he was like smiling and saying, like, oh, it's so hard for you, like, you know, to tell a father. And he was saying, you know, he said, why are you smiling? He said, it's a funny thing, I just had a conversation with Mark. He was telling me about Smart and his future, and I smiled and I said, like, oh, come on, Mark, that's not what you're thinking about. And he said, how do you know? And he said, well, because I've been around in life, I recognize enough that things are, you know, harder for you than you're saying. She's interesting. Mark Speight's father, the Mark Speight Foundation, Speight of the Art. We find it the most extraordinary, stimulating thing I've ever done in my life. He said, I've told Mark I'm not going up there till I'm 113 because I've not got the time. I never questioned why he did it. I don't know why he did it. He just couldn't live without the love of his fiancée. He was traumatized, and as one would be, because he was asleep while it happened. And he said, I'm planning to get 30,000 children access to the art, and I hope this gives people a little bit of comfort and allows them to say, like, be positive. As far as we're concerned, he'll be there forever. And I don't think I could add anything to that. What you know, will people go, oh, as a positives come out of a negative? Of course, you just don't want that person to have, you know, passed away in the or to have died in the first place. But the strength of people who do things like that, you know, because it can have a knock-on effect across your family when these things happen, when one tragedy happens. And wow, the strength of character to do that. So, you know, to Mark Speight's dad, thank you. That is an incredible thing that you're doing. And I know that this is a bit of a heavy subject. It's not my usual stuff, but I guess certain things stay with you, and certain things I just like to kind of discuss things that are on my mind and pop up with no rhyme or reason, really. But you know, you know, it's incredibly all-encompassing when you feel that there is nothing. You feel like nothing is important. And as somebody said something to me recently, and it's really, really helped me, which is like, the past, you can't change it. You just can't. There's nothing you can do about it. In the future, worrying about it is impossible because, well, or worthless, because you don't have a lot of control over it. But the present, and enjoying that present, so not being like, oh, I'm this age, or got this problem or this thing, but actually just being in the present is the best way of surviving, and just enjoying what's happening right now. You know, I talk a lot on this channel about things that I used to love and things that I've, you know, nostalgia. And nostalgia, I think, can be very powerful as a positive thing. You know, not the good old days and isn't it crap now, but like nostalgia, like, oh, that was so cool. Like, but like, there's lots of cool stuff now as well. Like, there's so much cool stuff going on now. And I have to remind myself of it a lot. And I have to kind of, you know, sometimes like force my mindset to focus on the positive things, because we all, you know, when things are going on top of you, it literally is just a case of keep going. Like that is it. Just keep going, just keep plodding on, and you know, it might not be better now, but it will get better. And it might not feel like that, but it will. So I hope the story of Mark Speight, and certainly Mark Speight's dad, has given you some sort of interest in checking out some of Mark Speight's stuff. If you just Google him, or maybe look on YouTube, there'll be a lot of stuff about, because it's such tragic circumstances with his partner. It might be things like that, but like I just like those larger than life characters from when we were younger. And he was so not BBC material, you know, like a lot of the presenters were kind of like same haircut, same kind of way of talking and stuff like that. He was just like, oh man, I love drawing, painting, making artistic things, like, and sharing it with you. You know, those are the best kind of teachers. Like people I know who are great teachers, they just like love, you know, getting their creative side and going, isn't this amazing? Try this. This is how you do it. And it's like, there's not a lot of those around, but those, the ones that they are, we need to like cherish them because they're pretty amazing. So have a great rest of your day. I hope this hasn't brought you down. I hope it's kind of ended on a positive in a lot of ways. You know, sort of the legacy of Mark Speight is pretty amazing. And, you know, I hopefully, if you just check out lots of different comics and TV shows about art and things like that, because it can sometimes be really hard to translate onto TV, and I think certain people don't put it across in the way that makes it particularly exciting. But he did. So yeah, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy yourself, and take care of yourselves. All right, and I'll speak to you soon, I'm sure. See you. Bye bye.
Hi, I'm Mark Speight,
How do you stop a chalk drawing from smudging?
and I'm going to prove to you that anybody can draw.
Knows you could soon be a top tuner.
Hello. So this is an interesting one. This is a really strange one, actually. So I was doing a stream a while ago, and somebody mentioned about the My Buddy dolls, and I didn't even realize that the Chucky doll was based upon this really strange, very strange My Buddy doll, and it really did have its own downfall. And this is quite dark, and it will get a bit darker as well as we talk about Child's Play 3. And this is really, we're going to kind of investigate, and I've kind of done my research and spoke to a few people and had a look online about the, obviously I was around for some of this as well, certainly the Child's Play 3 banning in the UK, and I'm not going to delve too deep into the specifics because I don't think it's respectful, and I don't think it's helpful. But I'm certainly not putting it as a, what's the word, saying it is inconsequential or anything like that. It's a very, very sad and upsetting thing that happened over here in the UK. And it kind of got tied in strangely with Child's Play 3, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I guess, you know, we had this with Columbine, and we had this with other things, you know, music and movies, and all getting kind of thrown into this list of reasons why things happen, because people are desperately searching for reasons, and often some of the the things might be, well, let's look at, say, gun control, or let's look at education, or let's look at these things a bit more tender. But I think as well, when people behave in ways that are hard to comprehend and hard to understand, we try to make sense of it by a few different things. One of them being we demonize that person or those people, and we say that we make them inhuman, so that the things they do, we could never do. So they're very separate, and there was something inherently wrong in this person. They were broken. Now we could also look at, is that due to circumstance, the way they were brought up? Is that due to chemicals flying around our bodies, or is it to do with the impact of traumas and abuse and all these different things, and abuse people becoming abusers and all this kind of stuff? It's a really, really deep and dark well to try and climb out of. And I'm not going to try and do that, really. I'm going to try and keep it not light, but I do think it's a fascinating subject. I think this whole thing about blaming art for the choices of an individual as a kind of easy escape, an easy way of putting blame at the door of something that is a relatively easy target, and also allows you to tidy that thing away, attack something maybe you don't like, if there's a kind of a conspiracy theory attached to it as well. Like, we don't like these kind of movies, or we don't like this kind of music, the bad moral values, because we're quite religious, or we're quite puritanical people. So we can put these things all together, and these things are all the reasons why bad things happen. So we're going to have a look to start with at My Buddy. Now, you saw some of the videos clips in there, and we're going to talk a bit about My Buddy before we kind of go into the UK, the sort of the dark history of Chucky. So My Buddy essentially does not exist anymore due to a few reasons, but the main one being a good guy doll named Chucky. So 80s kids know that My Buddy jingle. Now, I had to cut it out for copyright reasons, but you saw the actual advert. It is obviously the true inspiration behind Child's Play. Yes, around the time people said it was Cabbage Patch Dolls and Cabbage Patch Kids. We also had, obviously, my favorite, GPK, Garbage Pail Kids. But My Buddy was, inspired. This is where I start getting confused. My Buddy and Good Guys, they're kind of linked. Now, it's obvious where that look came from. When you look at the pictures and the things that I put up earlier on, there's that kind of, to be fair, Good Guy looks a little bit less Cabbage Patchy and a little bit more like a human being. Now, in the early part of that decade, I think it's important to remember that Cabbage Patch Dolls were absolutely huge. They were the toy du jour. Imagine Jingle All the Way, Turbo Man, that kind of thing. So they crushed everything around them, certain doll competitors. It was very much G.I. Joe's, He-Man, and then, Cabbage Patch Dolls, very along gender lines as well. Now, this was a bit different, though, because My Buddy was really marketed towards boys. And this is where it kind of ties in with Child's Play. It was started stocking them in 1985, selling quite well. I think they were 8 out of 10 top 10. I think they came in 8th. They had an offshoot Kid Sister doll, and this jingle, which I've only found out about recently. Somebody mentioned it to me. I was like, no way, is this a real thing? Sewn on clothing. And 1988 happens. So bear in mind, 1985, 86, 87, 88. So only 3 years into it. Chucky basically buries My Buddy Kid Sister Now, Don Mancini himself, creator of Chucky, mused that Cabbage Patch Dolls were the muse for Chucky, but he admitted himself, and I did find him actually committing to saying this, an inspiration from My Buddy. Now, the reason he didn't mention it very much around the time was because of potential lawsuits, which could have come his way and the studio's way. So they had to be very, very careful. Strange that they could, maybe, I guess they could say Cabbage Patch Doll because they don't look anything like Chucky doesn't look anything like Cabbage Patch Doll, doesn't have that, same box, same style, but obviously the other one, it's a little bit too close for comfort. So, the fake toy box, the way the commercials scream, everything was like a big copycat. So in the actual original script, and I did find this online, Chucky's name was Buddy, which was actually, if you remember, mentioned in I am no expert on Chucky, but was in the reboot in 2019. So they mentioned it then as well. Now, it's not that people are going, oh, he's just ripped off My Buddy. No, it's just, there is some similarities there. Now, this really did inadvertently end, like I said earlier on at the beginning, My Buddy. Now, every kid, and I'm certainly of that age, in the late 80s, early 90s, knew who Chucky was, even though I don't even know, I didn't see the films at the time, I don't think. I wasn't really that mega interested in it. I can't remember how old I was when I saw them. But for some kids, My Buddy became a bit of a nightmare-inducing toy because they'd seen Child's Play. Now, Play School stopped making the doll at the beginning of the 1990s. They also changed the look quite a lot to move away from the Child's Play look. So they were aware of this. And My Buddy went completely offline in the 90s and people just stopped buying him. Now, if you think about it, Chucky as, I believe the new series of Child's Play coming up, I think Chucky's killed probably around 80. He's got a confirmed kill count of around 80 at this point. And you don't want that tied in with your harmless, friendly toy. So they probably did the right thing at the time. Plus, I think, Cabbage Patch Dolls didn't go on forever, did they? Certainly these fads, they blow up and then they ebb and flow and then they disappear. Some things will make a comeback, but for example, I doubt Transformers sell the volume that they used to do, but they're still going. So anyway, moving on. So let's get into a little bit more serious stuff. So that's the downfall of My Buddy. I didn't even realize that they actually directly impacted that company through Chucky. So moving on. Now, one thing I wanted to say was in my video clip that I played at the beginning of the stream, there was a little thing it's saying about something like 4 in 10 children have seen a video nasty. Now, this was the only article there that isn't related to Child's Play, but I put that in for a reason. I put that in for a reason because I wanted to show that, even when they're making these headlines and the tabloid press are in the UK are incredibly lacking in morals, focused on sales, political tools, and also hypocritical in the way that they behave, but also the things that they say, like, for example, that sometimes they almost make their own argument against the things they're saying. So in that case, if we're saying that 4 out of 10 children have seen a video nasty, well, 4 out of 10 children are not committing horrific crimes, and 6 out of 10, you're saying that 6 out of 10 children are not influenced by these films, so therefore their behavior will be perfect. So either way, I always thought that was a strange headline. Now, the Daily Mirror one about banning Child's Play 3 was a kind of reaction to a horrific event. So I went back and I found and it took a long time for a study. So an actual study was paid for and funded by the government at the time to see if these kind of reactionary things that people were saying and the rumors that were happening, and to be fair, rumors now are even worse for fueling reactionary behavior and book burning and riots and things like that due to social media. So it's just as bad, because it's harder to pinpoint where those things started. But in this case, newspapers. So that newspaper that I showed you in the clip at the beginning of the stream, Daily Mirror taking responsibility for banning Child's Play 3. So the Home Office at the time did a detailed survey, a commission, to find out if there was a clear link between violent videos and aggressive behavior by youngsters. And this was sponsored by the Home Office in 1993. In the wake of the trial of two people who killed a young boy in the UK, and obviously people were absolutely floored by this horrendous act. Some of it played out on CCTV. That they were looking to make sense out of something you can't make sense out of. So there's some of these things are completely understandable, but then obviously people then twist the anger and use people's anger and use their lack of maybe rational thought and funnel them into something else, into something. And also it is a human nature to try and, like I said earlier on, to try and to comfort yourself by finding the reason for something. You know, how many times does something terrible happen and people are just going, why, searching, and that's what gets them, isn't it? That's what drives them mad and upset and full of grief and just, you know, go through awful situations, because we're trying to make sense of this. Because you go, well, you know, how could a human being do these things? How could a human being do this? You know, and I'm a human being and I couldn't do that. So what's different between me and them? And the answer is lots of things, like millions of things. So this study was done to kind of find out if there's something tangible away from the reactionary sort of DVD or VHS burning reaction from the newspapers, you know. So this, again, I said the terrible event happened in 1993, and the study lasted all the way till 1998. Now, I found this, it was published on January the 7th, 1998, and I got to see the report, and I had a good read through it. And, you know, they put a lot of time and effort and money into this. It was to see about, the questions were raised about the suitability of some videos, and suggested a more complex relationship between screen and real life violence. So it actually, the study didn't find, you know, this. The rumor was, and again, there are conflicting arguments here that this rumor is literally just that there was any evidence that they even saw Child's Play 3 and were influenced by it. Some people say they weren't. Some people say, well, actually they were. Even so, on its own, that would not be something that I would be able to go, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. Because yeah, some people are definitely more suggestible than others. But then you can't put that at the door of one thing. There are so many environmental factors, and I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. You know, I have a certain amount of understanding through my work, but this is something I think beyond even our greatest minds, because sometimes the answer is we just don't know why people do the things they do. If we did, then, you know, it would be very different, wouldn't it? So this was compiled by psychologists in Birmingham University. They found an exposure to violence at home and already developed delinquent tendencies were likely to nurture unhealthy taste for on-screen violence. So essentially, if you're around violence and you are exposed to violence, then you will search out and see things that are violent. Now, I find that quite interesting. So I'm going to keep reading because that, again, like I'm a strong believer that I saw some things that were violent when I was younger, some things that weren't. Um, I definitely think there has to be a sense of um, n- looking at things and educating younger people in what fact and fiction is, and why some things are suitable now, not now but maybe in the future, almost like the way the French approach alcohol, like a small sip when they're younger and demystifying something. I think if you make something into a very like contraband, or like they're going to sneak and do these things. So that's something to take into account anyway. But anyway, the research points to a pathway from having a violent home background to being an offender more likely to prefer violent films and violent actors. Now, the research provided involved assessing the reactions to violent videos in a group of 122 males from the ages of 15 to 21, a group which included violent offenders, non-violent offenders, and a control group of non-offending students. So, the film featuring Chucky was also mentioned as an influence on 4 people jailed for life for a murder of a 16-year-old girl in 1992. Now, this is where bam, you start thinking, oh, bandwagon, getting on the bandwagon. And I'm not going to go into the video nasty thing because I feel like there's so much stuff about video nasties out there already. But this side of the pond, in terms of related to a few years later, and this element about Child's Play 3, I think is quite interesting and maybe not discussed as much. And this happened, the second one actually happened closer to where I lived as a kid in Manchester. And apparently the killers were taunting and using lines from Child's Play. Now, obviously, you're thinking about stuff such as parental communication, guidance, support, love, nurture, all of these things. And I guess we're always going to come back to, and it sounds like such a cliche, nature, nurture, but it really does come down to a combination of those things, I think. Sometimes things sound really simple because when you break it down, they are quite simple in a way that we are a combination of, the way we arrived and the way we were brought up. So the implication is that both a history of family violence and offending behavior are necessary preconditions for developing a significant preference for violent film, action, and role models. This is an interesting report. I'm not sure I totally agree with it, because for example, I can watch I'm an adult, so it's different. My mind's probably, my brain is not as sort of moldable and as a child, but I think that idea of, like, for me, for example, I still find it very, very hard. I don't like any films where there's violence towards animals, like innocent, unknowing animals. That upsets me. But like, I can watch Charles Bronson mow down a load of people with a machine gun or something. So I don't know. Maybe there's definitely more nuance to it. However, they're talking about a specific group here, so we have to be mindful of that. So the pair wrote, offenders were more likely to prefer actors who typically play characters whose use of severe violence appears positive and successful. So a dangerous role model for young people, particularly those predisposed to crime and delinquency. So if they can link the things they see on TV and film to people they know in their real life who do similar, then I guess that makes it more real, doesn't it? So that kind of makes sense to me. They conceded there is some evidence that young people do imitate films. Scotland Yard has a copy made of a young offender using the glove used by Freddy Krueger, but there is no firm evidence of the extent of such copycat behavior. That sounds very anecdotal for a report. So both sides in the debate are likely to find material in their report to support their case. Right. So straight away, the conclusion is no conclusion. The report's finding was studied closely by former editor of the Independent newspaper. Again, I'm not sure why having the press involved. Anyway, who has been put in charge of the BBFC. Okay, so this was somebody who's in charge of the BBFC. The government has asked him to review the way videos and computer games are classified and censored to see if they need to tighten things up. And this was back in 1998. Interesting. So I want to know about and I actually took part in a study for a university, I think it was in Nottingham, where they were asking about childhood experiences with transgressive films and films that you saw, maybe 18 certificate films before you were 18. And I posted about it on my community tab. I found that really interesting to read everybody else's responses. It was very different to mine. I was sheltered in a certain way, but I was still able to find things for myself. And I think that maybe that idea of things being transgressive made me more drawn to it. So, it is such a multifaceted argument, and one that I am not intelligent enough to have the answer for. But then again, I don't think anybody does. But I am interested in your relationship with film, and possibly violent film or films that you saw when you were younger. And do you think that did impact you? Like, honestly, like, cards on the table, did you think it changed the way you behaved or the things that you looked up to and aspired to? I used to love Young Guns, but I definitely didn't see myself becoming a cowboy, even though I did like the lots of shooting and all that kind of cool stuff. I like Rocky. I remember watching Rocky 2 in primary school, and we had a film day, and I must have been about 7. We watched it, and afterwards we're all running around the playground just absolutely wellying each other, and I got a right smack in the face. I'll tell you what, I soon learned I was not Rocky. So I don't know what the lesson from that is. That's a strange place to leave this, but I am wondering if you're in the US or Canada or somewhere else around the world, were you aware of what was going on in the UK with Chucky 3, Child's Play 3, sorry? Were you impacted by, if you're a bit younger than me, were you impacted by the things that came out with Columbine? Were you like a Marilyn Manson or South Park fan? And, obviously Michael Moore did a lot to kind of talk about how silly some of those things were. So there's loads of interesting stuff that about this. I am kind of interested, all these things, all these experiences make us who we are. Obviously some of the stuff that I've read is quite harrowing and upsetting and quite sad. And it does make me consider, my family and the things we have access to, and, younger members of family and things like that. It just makes me think about it. But I genuinely think having an open and honest conversation and not talking down to kids, and showing that care and support and nurture and honest conversation does work really well, rather than kind of because I said so. And because I said so very rarely works, because it has to have an element of you built up the sort of the respect in the bank for that person to go, oh well, if they're saying it. Sometimes it can be that, but I think, again, it has to have built up over time, that kind of understanding and respect. So I don't know. What's your relationship with scary, violent horror films when you were younger? Certainly in the 80s, I think growing up in the 80s, I think it's a bit different than now. But then in terms of the access to what kids can see now, their relationship with social media, it's in a different stratosphere. So I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I certainly don't have any answers, but I'm really interested in listening to what you think about it. It's quite an emotive subject, because obviously there's some really real life horrific things happened, and you'd like to think that if you can play a small part in some of these things not happening through thinking about something, there's no harm in thinking and talking about it. You don't always have to, and this is going to sound like We Are the World, but you don't always have to take a side. But it is important to listen to to both sides. That's why I read the report rather than just the newspapers, because I was like, if I just reading these newspapers things, I'm going to get really angry here and just think like scapegoating something an easy thing to blame. And I didn't. That's why I read the report. And even then, some of that was a little bit wishy-washy. Right. So I'm just going to play the little clip for you again as we finish. And yeah, I really appreciate you spending your time with me and listening to me ramble on about this sort of thing from the 90s and 80s, and yeah, a bit more serious than usual, but I think it's an interesting subject. So yeah, I'll see you again. Take care. Bye bye.